Atheists, for such a smart group, you're so stupid. Actually, I should say, you're being so stupid, because I know you're not stupid. You're incredibly intelligent. And that's sort of my whole point. I just used sloppy language. I said you're stupid when I meant you're being stupid. The language that atheists use is nearly catastrophic for the cause. The fact that an atheist allows him or herself to be called an atheist is absolutely stunning to me. If you were a policeman, would you say, "Oh, I'm a non-waitress"? It's absolutely true, but it is about as non-descriptive as imaginable. So, you wouldn't accept that moniker if you were a cop. If someone said, "Hey, there's that non-waitress," you'd say, "Hey, stop that." You'd say, "I'm not a non-waitress," which isn't technically true, but that's okay. You say, "I'm a cop. That's what I do. Don't describe me by what I'm not, because I'm not an infinite number of things. So if you're going to describe me as I am." Atheist, the word I use for myself is a rationalist. I believe in rational thinking. I maybe could call myself a logicist, but it doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well. Then, if I want to be a little bit smarmy, I'll say to the what we currently call theists, I would call them arationalists. Why should we accept their presupposition that we are the ones lacking something? Atheism without theism. It's moronic. We're using their terms. It's like giving them the home field advantage. Similarly, when we use the term God, when we actually mean Yahweh, why would we do that? Again, that's giving them home field advantage. They've tried to co-opt the word God. They've made God equal to Yahweh. Has any Yahwehite, Yahweh follower ever come up to you and say, "Do you believe in Yahweh?" Nope. They say, "Do you believe in God?" which has a presupposition in there that there is only, it's a false dichotomy. It's either you believe in my God or you don't. Anyway, I'm a little bit off the track there. But the point is that language is important. Call yourself a rationalist or anything but an atheist. In the same way, you might call yourself a cop, you might call yourself a Bobby, a police officer, a peace officer, whatever it is. All of those things describe what you are, and you don't use a label that describes what you're not. I wonder if I can edit this thing. This is my first video I've ever made. Incredible. Living in the dark ages. All right, so let's see. Yahweh doesn't equal God. Atheist is a really bad term for yourself. And I guess those are the two things that I'm going to start. There's other language issues that are important. I guess I'll just touch on another one briefly, because I just commented on a couple of YouTube videos. Atheists say all the time, "You can't prove a negative." Are you kidding me? That's as moronic as saying, "Give me proof of God." Give me proof that God doesn't exist. If you respond saying you can't prove a negative, I can prove that you can prove a negative. Watch this. Jim didn't kill Sally. Okay, how can you prove that? Well, because Jim is dead. Okay, I proved it didn't happen. Similarly, you can prove a negative, something like 6 plus 2 does not equal 9. Proving something doesn't happen. When you add 6 and 2 together, you don't get 9. I can prove that very easily. Just lay out a bunch of stuff. I can do it with my fingers if you'd like, but I think that's pretty obvious. Similarly, even with something physical, you could prove there is not an elephant in the room. So you can't say to an arationalist, You can't prove a negative. Stop asking me to prove negatives. Because what they will do, the irrationalists will do, they'll latch on to the other meanings. You're meaning something very specific. That's one type of negative that can't be proved. But there's a number of types of negatives that can be proved. So when you just use a term, a negative can't be proved, you're being very sloppy with your language, and that enables them to say, those atheists, they're just full of it. Obviously, you can prove a negative. Why would they even claim that? And they dismiss you and your arguments out of hand. So, basically, I'm just saying, be a lot more careful with logic. You can really undermine yourself. I mean, be careful with language. You can really undermine yourself and the cause by using terms that are so vague that both sides can correctly claim to be right. And one example is just you can't prove a negative. Atheists know you can't prove a negative, a certain type, but theists also know you can prove a negative. So that statement is true and untrue at the same time, which is problematic. Oh, another thing that I wanted to touch on is the idea of faith and belief, and where irrationalists might say something like, it takes just as much faith to be an atheist as it does to be a theist. I'm using their language there. Again, if I were to make that statement, and I was in their shoes, I would say it takes just as much faith to be a rationalist as it does to be an irrationalist. Totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? See, atheists are incredibly intelligent. They never lose their train of thought. That's something that atheists never do. Oh yeah, just point of using language that both sides could claim that they're right, because the language was simply poorly used. There was just a video that I commented on where someone said it doesn't take any faith to not believe in something, and that's the kind of thing where the what I was just talking about, the theists would say it takes just as much faith to be an atheist. And part of the trick there is that it takes faith to believe not in something. I'll explain that in just a second. But it doesn't take faith to not believe. In other words, if a Yahwehite said to me, hey, you don't believe, and that takes just as much faith, I would say, you're correct if I'm saying that Yahweh does not exist. That takes as much faith as saying Yahweh does exist. But to say, I don't believe that Yahweh exists, doesn't require any faith. So if you say, I believe Yahweh doesn't exist, that requires faith. If you say, I believe Yahweh does... I'm going to have to redo this whole video. 8 minutes. Well, maybe I'll just post it anyway. Learning curve of YouTube videos. Anyway, I hope the point was made, which is you got to be careful with language. If you use sloppy language, both sides can be right, and you don't forward the discussion at all. We want to move this thing forward. We want to kill all this Yahwehite BS and all that stuff. All right, toodaloo.